You feel the pull before you even notice it. Someone says something unfair, dismissive, careless, and your body reacts before your mind does. Your chest tightens, your thoughts sharpen into arguments, and silence suddenly feels like surrender. You tell yourself that if you do not respond now, you will lose respect, lose ground, lose authority. So you speak, you explain, you confront, and afterward, even if you were right, something feels off. Your words linger longer than they should. Your peace does not return with them. This is not a failure of courage. It is a misunderstanding of power. Most people believe authority is proven through reaction, that to remain silent is to be weak, passive, or afraid. But look closely at your own experience. Each time you react emotionally, notice who is in control in that moment. Is it reason, steady, and deliberate? Or is it the need to correct, to be seen, to regain balance through the behavior of someone else? Authority that depends on another person's response is not authority at all. It is dependence wearing the mask of strength. Silence, when chosen consciously, is not absence. It is containment. It is the moment you refuse to let external noise rearrange your inner order. This video is not about becoming quiet to avoid conflict. It is about recognizing when your reaction is costing you more than your silence ever could. If you stay with this reflection, you will begin to see that the urge to confront is often the first signal that something inside you is slipping out of your command. And once you see that, a more uncomfortable question appears. What exactly do you lose every time emotion speaks before reason has entered the room? The hidden cost of confrontation, how emotion hands away power. Confrontation feels powerful because it gives the mind something immediate to do with discomfort. When tension rises, when someone challenges you, misunderstands you, or crosses an invisible line, reaction feels like relief. Words rush forward as if they can restore balance. In that moment, confrontation seems like control. But what is actually happening is more precise and far less flattering. You are trading inner stability for the hope of external correction. Every emotionally charged confrontation begins with the same hidden demand. That reality should behave differently so that you can feel settled again. You want the other person to understand, to agree, to back down, or at least to acknowledge your position. This is where authority quietly slips away. The moment your peace depends on another person's response, you have already surrendered command over yourself. Notice how confrontation escalates, not because the issue is important, but because emotion seeks validation. When the other person resists, explains themselves, or mirrors your intensity, the nervous system interprets it as a threat. Reason narrows, tone sharpens, words multiply. What began as a desire for clarity becomes a struggle for dominance, and dominance is fragile. It must be defended again and again. Afterward, the cost reveals itself. The mind does not rest. It replays the exchange. It edits sentences. It imagines alternative outcomes. Even when you believe you were right, the body remains tense. Authority never settles there. True authority leaves no residue. It does not require mental rehearsal or emotional aftercare. The Stoics understood this dynamic with unsettling clarity. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 2, Paragraph 1, he reminds himself that other people act according to their own judgments, not yours, and that their behavior cannot injure your inner faculty unless you allow it. This is not detachment. It is precision. You are harmed not by what is said or done, but by the judgment that demands a response. Confrontation fueled by emotion is an attempt to control impressions, how you are seen, how you are treated, how events unfold. But impressions are not yours to govern. Epictetus makes this distinction unmistakable when he teaches that some things are up to us and others are not. When you confront in order to force an outcome, you step outside your domain. You place your well-being in foreign hands. This is why emotional confrontation feels urgent. Urgency is the signal that the mind believes something essential is at risk. Respect, status, security. But none of these are preserved through reaction. Seneca warns in his letters that anger promises action but delivers regret. It moves quickly, speaks loudly, and leaves the soul poorer than it found it. Authority, by contrast, does not rush. It does not explain itself under pressure. It does not need to win the moment to remain intact. When you confront from reason, words are few. When you confront from emotion, words are excessive. Excess is always a sign of loss, never of strength. This does not mean you should never speak. It means you must see clearly what speaking costs when it is driven by the need to feel restored. Every time you react emotionally, you teach your mind that peace is conditional. That lesson repeats itself until anxiety becomes a habit. There is a quieter form of power that does not depend on correction, persuasion, or victory. But to access it, you must be willing to let go of the illusion that confrontation gives you authority. What it often gives instead is momentary relief followed by lasting disturbance. And this realization opens a deeper question. If authority is not found in reaction or dominance, then where does it actually live? And how is it preserved when silence is chosen deliberately? Authority reframed, self-possession versus dominance. If authority is not proven by reaction, then it must be rooted somewhere else. This is where most people struggle because they have been taught to recognize power only when it is visible. Loud certainty, immediate answers, strong opinions delivered without pause. But these are signals of presence, not authority. Presence can be forced. Authority cannot. Stoic philosophy draws a quiet but decisive line here. Authority is not the ability to influence others. It is the ability to remain governed by reason, regardless of external pressure. When Marcus Aurelius wrote Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 4, Paragraph 3, he reminded himself that the ruling faculty within must remain untroubled, even when the world presses in. He was not describing passivity, he was describing self-possession. Self-possession is the form of authority that cannot be challenged because it does not need to assert itself. It does not rush to correct misunderstandings. It does not compete for dominance in conversation. It acts when action is required and remains still when stillness preserves order. This is why silence, in the Stoic sense, is not a strategy. It is a consequence of inner alignment. Most confrontations are attempts to reclaim a sense of control that was lost internally. Someone's words unsettled you, and you seek to restore balance by changing them, convincing them, or overpowering them. But authority does not come from rearranging others. It comes from refusing to let others rearrange you. When your thoughts remain coherent and your values intact, nothing essential has been threatened and nothing urgent needs to be said. This reframing is difficult because it challenges a deeply emotional belief. The belief that if you do not respond, you will be diminished. That silence will be interpreted as weakness. But Stoic wisdom asks a sharper question. Weak according to whom, and by what standard? The judgment of others is not evidence, it is noise. Epictetus made this unmistakably clear when he taught that if you wish to be invincible, make no treaty with things outside your control. Reputation, approval, and recognition all exist beyond your authority. The moment you act to secure them, you become dependent on forces that do not answer to you. That dependence is felt as anxiety, even when disguised as confidence. Authority grounded in reason feels different. It is slower, quieter, more selective. It does not explain itself to everyone because explanation is often a request for validation. It does not chase resolution in every disagreement because resolution is not always within reach. Instead, it measures action against principle, not against emotional pressure. Silence emerges naturally from this posture, not because speaking is forbidden, but because speaking is no longer compulsory. Words are used when they serve virtue, not when they serve agitation. This is why silence unsettles people who are driven by emotion. It offers no leverage, no reaction to feed on, no instability to exploit. And here is the critical shift. When you stop equating authority with dominance, you stop needing to prove yourself in moments of tension. You begin to notice that your calm carries more weight than your arguments ever did. That restraint commands more respect than explanation. Not because others suddenly change, but because you are no longer negotiating your self-command. This does not mean you withdraw from life. It means you enter it with a different center of gravity. You are present, attentive, and responsive, but not pulled. When silence appears, it is not avoidance. It is structure. It is the visible edge of an inner order that does not need to announce itself. Once authority is understood as self-possession rather than dominance, a new question becomes unavoidable. How does this inner authority hold when conflict is real, when criticism is sharp, and when situations genuinely challenge your sense of fairness and dignity? That question leads directly into the most practical Stoic tool of all, one that quietly decides when silence is strength and when action is required. The dichotomy of control in real conflict. Conflict becomes unbearable when the mind treats everything as its responsibility. A sharp comment, a false accusation, a look of disrespect, and suddenly you feel summoned to act. Not because action is required, but because the mind believes it must restore order everywhere at once. This is where exhaustion begins. You are trying to govern a territory that was never yours. The Stoics offered a correction that is both simple and severe. Some things are within your power, some things are not. This distinction is not philosophical decoration. It is a line of command. When it is ignored, emotion fills the vacuum. In real conflict, the mistake is rarely about what happens. It is about what you assume belongs to you. You assume that others should behave reasonably. You assume that misunderstandings should be cleared. You assume that unfairness must be confronted immediately. These assumptions feel moral, even virtuous, but they quietly blur the boundary between your will and the will of others. Epictetus was uncompromising on this point. In his discourses, he teaches that you are disturbed not by events, but by the judgments you form about them. When criticism appears, the event is neutral. The disturbance comes from the belief that this criticism must be answered, corrected, or neutralized. That belief is optional, even if it does not feel that way at first. Silence begins to make sense when you stop trying to control outcomes, not as a rule, but as a consequence. When you see clearly that another person's opinion is not yours to command, urgency dissolves. The emotional charge weakens because the imagined responsibility disappears. You no longer need to convince, persuade, or defend your inner order. It is already intact. This is where the dichotomy of control becomes practical rather than theoretical. Your tone is yours. Your timing is yours. Your integrity is yours. Whether the other person understands you, agrees with you, or respects you is not. When this division is honored, silence often becomes the most rational response, not because speaking is wrong, but because speaking would attempt to influence what reason tells you is outside your reach. Marcus Aurelius returns to this idea repeatedly. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 6, paragraph 30, he reminds himself that the best revenge is not to be like the wrongdoer. This is not moral superiority, it is operational clarity. By refusing to mirror disorder, you preserve internal command. By refusing to escalate, you deny chaos a second voice. Consider how many conflicts persist only because both sides believe they must act. Each response feeds the next. Each explanation demands another. Silence interrupts this chain, not through avoidance, but through refusal to participate in what cannot be mastered. This refusal is not weakness. It is obedience to reality. The mind resists this at first because it feels like loss. Loss of control, loss of position, loss of justice. But look closer. What you are losing is the illusion that you were ever responsible for shaping another person's inner world. That illusion is heavy. Letting it go is lightness. When the boundary is respected, action becomes rarer, but more precise. You speak when your words align with reason and virtue, not when emotion demands release. You remain silent when speaking would only seek reassurance or dominance. This clarity restores energy. It also restores dignity. And here is the subtle shift. Once you no longer feel responsible for correcting everything, silence stops feeling tense. It becomes neutral, even restful. You are not holding yourself back. You are simply not reaching beyond your command. But there is still a fear many carry. The fear that silence means suppressing emotion, denying what you feel, or becoming cold. That fear must be addressed honestly, because without clarity here, silence will always feel like restraint rather than freedom. Why silence disarms emotion, reason as regulator, not suppressor. Many people resist silence because they confuse it with suppression. They imagine that if they do not speak, something inside them will rot. That unexpressed emotion will harden into resentment. This fear is understandable, but it is built on a misunderstanding of how emotion actually works. Stoicism does not ask you to deny what you feel. It asks you to decide who governs it. Emotion is not the enemy of reason. Obedience to emotion is. When anger rises, when anxiety tightens the chest, when the urge to respond feels unbearable, the problem is not the feeling itself. The problem is the assumption that the feeling must immediately become action. Silence creates a space where that assumption can be examined. Reason functions as a regulator, not a censor. It does not erase emotion, it slows it down. In that slowing, something critical happens. You regain choice. Instead of being carried forward by impulse, you stand beside it and observe. This is the moment Marcus Aurelius describes in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 8, paragraph 47, when he reminds himself that the mind has the power to withdraw its assent from impressions. The impression arrives. The judgment does not have to follow. This pause is where dignity is restored. When emotion moves unchecked, it collapses time. Everything feels urgent. Everything demands resolution now. Silence stretches time back to its natural length. In that stretch, perspective returns. You begin to see that what felt intolerable is simply uncomfortable. What felt threatening is simply unpleasant. Reason does not belittle emotion. It places it in proportion. This is why silence disarms emotional chaos, not because it blocks expression, but because it interrupts escalation. Most emotional damage does not come from what you feel. It comes from what you do while feeling it. Words spoken in agitation cannot be recalled. Confrontations driven by impulse cannot be easily repaired. Silence prevents the conversion of temporary emotion into permanent consequence. Seneca warned repeatedly about this in his letters. He observed that anger always outruns reason and leaves the mind exhausted. But he also noted that when anger is delayed, it often dissolves on its own. Silence is not avoidance. It is delay with intention. It gives emotion time to reveal whether it contains truth or only heat. This distinction matters. Some emotions carry information, others carry momentum. Silence allows you to tell the difference. When you remain quiet, you are not swallowing emotion. You are testing it. Does this feeling point toward a virtuous action, or does it simply want release? If it is the latter, reason knows to let it pass without obedience. This is how silence becomes strength rather than restraint. You are not forcing yourself into stillness. You are choosing not to act until clarity arrives. And clarity always arrives slower than emotion. Those who mistake speed for sincerity never experience this difference. There is another effect that emerges here, often unnoticed at first. When you no longer rush to respond, your emotional world becomes less volatile. Not because life becomes easier, but because fewer events are given permission to dominate your inner state. Silence becomes a stabilizing force, not a burden. But even with this understanding, one question remains unresolved. If reason can regulate emotion, what allows reason itself to remain steady when outcomes are uncertain and reality refuses to cooperate? That question leads to the Stoic acceptance that many resist the longest. Acceptance of fate, not as resignation, but as alignment. And this is where silence reaches its deepest justification. Acceptance of fate. When nothing needs to be corrected. Most emotional struggle is not caused by what happens, but by the refusal to accept that it happened. The mind argues with reality long after reality has moved on. It imagines alternative outcomes, rehearses different responses, and quietly demands that the past or the present should have unfolded differently. This resistance creates tension that no amount of confrontation can relieve. Acceptance of fate does not mean liking what happens. It means recognizing what is no longer negotiable. When this recognition is absent, silence feels unbearable, because speaking becomes an attempt to rewrite what already exists. But when fate is accepted, silence feels appropriate, even natural. There is nothing left to correct. Marcus Aurelius returned to this discipline relentlessly. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 4, paragraph 49, He reminds himself to welcome whatever comes woven into the pattern of his destiny, because it could not have come to anyone else in that moment. This is not mysticism. It is practical realism. What has occurred is now part of the world. Fighting it internally only multiplies its weight. Confrontation often arises from this inner resistance. Someone acted unfairly. Circumstances did not align with your effort. Recognition did not arrive. The emotional impulse is to push back, to demand adjustment, to force acknowledgement. But what is actually being resisted is not the person or the event. It is fate itself. And fate does not respond to argument. Acceptance dissolves the false urgency behind reaction. When you stop demanding that reality justify itself to you, the pressure to speak diminishes. Silence becomes an expression of agreement with the present moment, not approval, but acknowledgement. This acknowledgement restores energy that was previously spent on internal protest. Seneca observed that much of human suffering comes from wishing things to be other than they are. He warned that the mind which cannot accept necessity will never be at rest. Acceptance of fate is the discipline that teaches the mind to stop struggling against immovable facts and to redirect effort toward what remains possible. This redirection is where silence gains depth. You are no longer silent because you have nothing to say. You are silent because you understand that speech cannot change what is fixed. Words become unnecessary when the mind stops negotiating with inevitability. This does not mean you become passive. Acceptance is not submission. It is clarity about where action still matters. You accept what has already occurred. You accept the limits of your influence, and within those limits, you act with precision rather than desperation. Anxiety about the future weakens under this discipline. The future is not something to be controlled in advance. It is something to be met with preparedness. When fate is accepted, attention returns to the present, where your character, judgment, and conduct remain fully under your command. Silence, in this sense, is not withdrawal. It is composure. It is the visible sign that the mind is no longer at war with reality, and a mind not at war does not need to assert itself constantly to feel secure. Once fate is accepted and reason governs emotion, silence begins to take on a new role. It is no longer defensive or reactive. It becomes an active expression of authority in the world. But this authority is subtle. It shows itself not in grand gestures, but in moments where restraint reshapes the entire dynamic of a situation. To understand how this works in real life, silence must be seen in motion, not as an idea, but as a lived behavior that changes outcomes without forcing them. Silence as authority in action. When not responding changes everything. There is a moment in every tense situation when the direction is decided. It happens quietly, often unnoticed. Someone provokes. A comment lands with the intent to unsettle. A situation invites escalation. Most people move automatically at this point. They respond because they always have. They match tone, energy, and urgency without reflection. And by doing so, they surrender the structure of the moment to whoever initiated the disturbance. Silence interrupts this pattern in a way nothing else can. Not dramatic silence, not passive withdrawal, but composed restraint. When you do not respond immediately, you remove the fuel the situation depends on. Emotional pressure requires participation to grow. Without it, the dynamic shifts. This is where silence becomes authority in action. not because it dominates the other person, but because it stabilizes the environment. When one mind remains ordered, disordered minds lose their leverage. The absence of reaction forces the situation to reveal its true nature. Either the issue was never serious, only emotional, or it becomes clear that action, not argument, is required. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 11, paragraph 18, he reflects on the importance of meeting provocation with calm judgment rather than reflex. He reminds himself that no one can compel him to abandon reason unless he allows it. This is not a thought meant for solitude alone. It is a discipline meant for interaction. When silence is chosen deliberately, it communicates without explanation. It signals that your inner state is not accessible on demand, that you do not need to defend your position emotionally in order to maintain it. This unsettles those who rely on reaction to feel powerful. They expect resistance, not restraint. When restraint appears, their strategy collapses. This does not mean silence always resolves the situation immediately. Sometimes it reveals discomfort, awkwardness, even irritation. But these reactions belong to the other person, not to you. By remaining silent, you refuse to absorb what is not yours. You allow others to sit with their own agitation rather than outsourcing it to you. There are moments, of course, when action is required. Silence does not replace courage. It prepares it. When you speak after silence, words carry weight. They are no longer impulsive. They are chosen. This difference is felt immediately. Others may not agree with you, but they recognize coherence, and coherence commands attention. Silence also changes your relationship with time. You stop chasing immediate resolution. You allow situations to unfold. Many conflicts dissolve simply because no one feeds them. Others clarify themselves. What remains after silence is usually what actually matters. This is why silence is not avoidance. Avoidance is fear of engagement. Silence is mastery of engagement. It is knowing when not to enter, when to wait, and when to act without noise. It requires more discipline than confrontation, not less. As this becomes habit, something unexpected happens. You begin to trust yourself more, not because you always get the outcome you want, but because you know you will not betray your inner order under pressure. This trust is the foundation of authority. Others may sense it, but more importantly, you feel it. And yet, silence alone is not the destination. It is part of a larger posture, a way of moving through life that replaces reaction with presence. To understand that posture fully, everything explored so far must be gathered into a single internal orientation. That integration is where this journey leads next, from reaction to deliberate presence. At this point, silence is no longer a technique. It is no longer something you decide to use in certain situations. It has become the visible expression of a deeper orientation toward life. Reaction has been replaced by presence. Urgency has been replaced by discernment. What once felt like restraint now feels like alignment. This integration begins when the mind stops dividing experience into threats and victories. Instead, it evaluates each moment by a simpler measure. Is this within my control? Does this require action guided by reason? Or is this something to be accepted without resistance? When this internal sorting becomes automatic, emotional chaos loses its momentum. The dichotomy of control no longer appears as an idea you remember under stress. It becomes the architecture of your perception. Criticism arrives, and you recognize immediately what belongs to you and what does not. Uncertainty about the future arises, and you respond by strengthening your present conduct rather than rehearsing imagined outcomes. Silence flows naturally from this clarity, not as a refusal to engage, but as a refusal to misplace effort. Acceptance of fate now works quietly in the background. You no longer fight what has already occurred. You no longer demand that reality adjust itself to soothe your feelings. This acceptance does not flatten emotion, it stabilizes it. You feel fully, but you are no longer dragged. The difference is subtle, but decisive. Reason holds the center. Not cold logic, but disciplined judgment. Reason becomes the filter through which emotion passes before becoming action. This is what Epictetus meant when he taught that freedom is found in wanting events to happen as they do happen. When reason governs desire, the mind stops colliding with the world. From this posture, authority emerges without effort. You are not trying to appear composed. You are composed. You are not trying to be respected. You are self-respecting. Others may or may not respond to this. That no longer determines your stability. Silence here is not always literal. Sometimes it is a few well-chosen words. Sometimes it is action without explanation. Sometimes it is refusal to participate in unnecessary conflict. What unites these expressions is not quietness, but coherence. Your inner world and outer behavior no longer contradict each other. This coherence changes how you experience life. Fewer situations feel urgent. Fewer words feel necessary. Fewer emotions feel overwhelming. Not because life has become simpler, but because your relationship with it has become more honest. You are no longer enslaved by the need to respond. You are no longer anxious about controlling outcomes that were never yours. You are present where you can act and at peace where you cannot. This is not detachment from life. It is full engagement without self-betrayal. There is only one place left to arrive, not a conclusion that instructs you what to do next, but a quiet return to something you have not lost, only neglected: your capacity for self-command. That return does not announce itself loudly. It ends, as it should, in stillness, the quiet return to self-command. There is a moment, often unnoticed, when the struggle to be heard, understood, or validated simply loosens its grip. Not because the world has become gentler, but because you no longer demand that it confirm your worth. This is the quiet return to self-command. Nothing dramatic happens here. No victory is declared. No final argument is won. And that is precisely the point. Peace was never waiting at the end of confrontation. It was waiting at the end of resistance. Throughout this journey, one truth has been unfolding steadily. Authority does not come from imposing yourself on events, people, or outcomes. It comes from refusing to abandon yourself in the face of them. When reaction fades, when urgency dissolves, when silence becomes natural rather than forced, you begin to recognize a familiar inner posture, one you may have felt briefly before, in rare moments of clarity. Now, it is no longer rare. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 12, paragraph 36, that the mind becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When those thoughts are disciplined, calm follows. When they are chaotic, unrest is inevitable. Silence reflects a mind that has chosen its color deliberately. Not numbness, not indifference, order. This is why the need to win arguments weakens, why the desire to explain yourself fades, why emotional storms no longer demand immediate expression. You are not suppressing anything. You are no longer confused about where your power ends. You act where action belongs. You accept where acceptance is required. And in that balance, life becomes lighter without becoming shallow. The authority gained here is not something others must recognize for it to exist. It is felt internally first. A steadiness that remains even when misunderstood. A dignity that does not depend on agreement. A calm that does not ask permission from circumstances. This is the authority that cannot be taken, because it was never granted by anyone else. Silence, in the end, is simply the evidence of this shift. Evidence that the mind is no longer begging reality to cooperate. Evidence that emotion has been welcomed, but not obeyed, blindly. Evidence that fate has been accepted without bitterness. Evidence that reason has reclaimed its proper role. Nothing has been added to you. Nothing external was required. What changed was the direction of command. When noise appears, you are not compelled to answer it. When provocation arises, you are not required to absorb it. When uncertainty returns, as it always does, you meet it without panic. This is not a technique you will remember occasionally. It is a way of standing in the world. And here is the quiet truth that closes this reflection. Authority was never something to be proven. It was something to be preserved. Each time you chose restraint over reaction, clarity over urgency, and reason over emotional chaos, you protected it. The mind that can remain still does not need to be loud. The person who governs themselves does not need to confront everything. And the one who accepts reality as it is no longer feels enslaved by it. That is where this journey ends. Not in silence as absence, but in silence as command.